Good morning, I'm Daniel Sinacero, CEO of Connect Media and Connect Commercial Real Estate News. Every minute and every second matters. Sharing vital information is important. COVID-19, aka coronavirus, has changed our world. Today we are talking about how it's impacting the different property types and how we keep the tenants and visitors within our structures safe and the precautions and measures taken at the property level. At this time, the industry needs to come together and educate ourselves with best practices. To help us with this conversation, we have brought together some of the greatest minds within our industry, from retail, industrial, office, hospitality, senior housing, and multifamily, to talk about keeping tenants and visitors safe and what precautions we are taking proactively, reactively, as they manage their assets. For the second part of this conversation, we will talk about business and leasing sales and hear what our guests are hearing from their clients and from the different property types. There's a lot of information out there. I'd like to get it from the trenches, not just from the news. At that, I want to introduce our group of experts. To talk about apartments, we have Julianne Goodfellow, Senior Director, Government Affairs for the National Multi-Housing Council. We also have Laura Boyd, Program Manager, Property Risk from Pinnacle. On the office side, we have Michael Odo, CEO of Metro Services, which provides cleaning services to office buildings within Northern and Southern California. Also on the office side, we have Jeff Ferreira, Rising Realty Partners, Senior General Manager, and can speak a lot from his portfolio. Drew Geneva, Chief Asset Services Officer for Madison Marquette, will also be talking about retail. He'll also be talking about office with his acquisition of PMRG and his acquisition of Roseview to share his insights on senior housing. For the retail perspective, also we have Angie Solanki, who is National Director of Retail Services for Colliers, and then Global SIOR President, Mark Duclos, who is also President and co-founder of Century Commercial. He has joined us for the industrial perspective, also to talk on behalf of SIOR, which represents the most active industrial and office brokers globally. Finally, for hospitality, we have Kirsten Pierce, VP of Member Engagement Services for the American Hotel and Lodging Association. Thank you all for joining me today. We're going to jump right into it. Let's talk office. Michael, you're on the front lines. Your company provides cleaning services. How are you advising your customers, and what are you doing for the buildings that you service in order to keep them safe?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. We understand the fear that people have concerning COVID-19, how it spreads, and who may be affected. At Metro, our first concern is for our employees, the tenants, and the guests at the buildings we service. So to your question, we're advising our employees and customers alike to be calm and to wash their hands with soap and water. I know it sounds trite, but it's true. It's the most important thing I think that we can all do. We provide personal protective equipment to our workers, and we're asking our customers to remind their tenants about personal hygiene. Please inform them if they're sick, stay home, to wash your hands often. No one can truly guarantee anyone's safety. So we're being vigilant. We're monitoring several websites, the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, the California, San Francisco, and Los Angeles Departments of Health, EPA, along with news outlets like this one and local and national news feeds. We are deploying EPA-approved disinfectants at all of our locations, and some of our clients are specifying products that they want to use, and we're complying. It's becoming increasingly difficult to find some of these chemicals, but we've got a pretty good supply, and I think most of our competitors do too. As of 9 o'clock this morning, there have been no known instances of COVID-19 being transmitted via touching a surface. You're getting it because it's an airborne disease. So it's important to follow the CDC guidelines. The latest one is to wait 24 hours after a building is infected before we do a follow-up disinfectant. But keeping things clean and disinfected is always the best practice. So we've deployed a number of tools, an electrostatic device that will completely encapsulate what we're spraying, and using the disinfectant. So that's what Metro is doing for this, and we're trying to stay abreast of all the latest developments. It's a pretty fluid situation.
Drew, and Jeff, you're up next. But Drew, can you, as an owner, tell us, and managers, what are you doing to create a safer environment for the tenants and visitors?
So very much in part with what Michael had mentioned. So from a services standpoint, the primary goal is to over-communicate. And when I say that, that's about making sure that we as a company are communicating daily about any updates on the CDC guidelines, any information from city and state, and as well as with our property managers about increasing the number of sanitizing stations throughout all our properties. It is about the life and health and safety of everybody that comes in contact with any of our real estate, and it's about taking the proper precautions. One thing I've learned is the spread is obviously person to person and people as close as 6 feet. So I would have thought it would have been much closer. Posting signs, which we're in the process now of putting together, about if you're going to cough, cough into your elbow or use a handkerchief, and the same thing with sneezing. That is how it gets spread, at least according to the CDC, and to be very proactive on cleaning and disinfecting surfaces daily, and probably will need to move to a more regular basis. So it's that part of the process, but it starts with over communicating to the clients, to the tenants, and to the visitors.
Jeff, want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I'll kind of reiterate what both Michael and Drew said, but trying to tackle it up front is good, and we're doing the same thing. We've increased our cleaning schedule of all the touch surfaces and are using disinfectants. We're purposely having our security guards cleaning all throughout the day. We're normally, you don't keep them in the back, but you try not to get them in the way, where right now they're right out there during peak in and out times, wiping down the surfaces. So everyone's saying, look, we're doing all that we can to take care of you. It's also, I think, pretty crucial to maintain our visitor logs. So all of our high rises have, they monitor the guests as they come in and when they leave, so they constantly know who's there. Some of the low rise or buildings that don't have as high security, we don't. And we've kind of now made a point to keep track of a log of everyone that comes in and out, so that we know who's there and when, so that if by chance there is suspicion that there's a case, we can certainly go back and work with the CDC to say, hey, here's the list of people that were in the building on these days, and if we have to contact them, we can.
Yeah, that's crucial. That's very
yeah.
crucial. Michael, is there anything machinery-wise, or is there anything that you find that's been better for equipment as far as you're doing the office? I know that I read an article that you mentioned there was different equipment you're using, or is there anything like that, or is it just all the cleansing part of it?
There are a couple of pieces of equipment that we've deployed. One is a product called Protexus, and it's an electrostatic sprayer, so that the particles are airborne, and instead of just hitting the surface that's directly in front of the sprayer, it completely surrounds it and encapsulates what it is we're spraying. So we're using that on desk chairs for the arms, doorknobs, any high touch surface is what we're using that device to spray. And they're expensive devices, so we've probably bought 24 of them already. So we're using them all over the state of California right now.
That's great. All right, let's move on to multifamily. Julianne and Laura, but Julianne, why don't you kick us off, especially with these community spaces? It's all about it's been amenities with apartments. It's been about these gyms, saunas, all about these communal areas. What do you, as apartment owners and managers and members, what are you seeing for a safer living environment for residents and guests?
Thanks, Daniel, for including us. We have seen that specifically fitness centers have been the #1 inquiry from our membership. They want to know how to handle that as we deal with this risk. But we recommend approaching this in a more holistic way and approaching it as about preparedness overall. So NMHC has released a variety of resources that are helpful for apartment firms, including a coronavirus resource document. And also we have launched a emergency preparedness listserv. Both of those can be found at nmhc.org/COVID-19. And also for non-members, they're welcome to access both the emergency preparedness listserv and also all resources. We view this as obviously a public safety crisis, and therefore it's a public service that we can provide for apartment firms and beyond. And then we frame this then as, first of all, you want to make sure you develop an incident response plan with a crisis team in place. And that's going to include folks like your people in your C-suite, legal, HR, IT, and operations, and make sure they're all working together. And this crisis team can look like one that you might have for, say a hurricane or other natural disaster. So really approach that as you would approach any other risk in being prepared. And then once you've developed your incident response plan, you want to make sure you're monitoring, communicating with government officials, including public health agencies, because the state and local ones will have the most accurate information. And then communication, as you've already heard before, communication is number one. You want to make sure that both your residents and employees are aware of what's going on, and you also want to emphasize that prevention practices are number one. Now, when you're looking specifically at the common spaces, signage is going to help. You want to remind people to say if they're using fitness center, wash their hands before and after using this space, reminding them to wipe down their equipment once they've used it. And also as the apartment firm, maintenance should make sure they're cleaning more frequently. And also make sure you're reminding residents that if they are feeling sick, if they have any symptoms, or if know that they've been exposed to COVID-19, that they are not using public spaces. This is, it's incumbent on them to make sure that they're not increasing the risk factors for other. And ultimately, given the scope of the risk and considering how likely an outbreak is in your area, we would recommend not ruling out closing a fitness center or other common space if needed.
Laura, you're really on the front lines with Pinnacle. You manage tons and tons of properties on both coasts and through the middle of America. There's a lot of news out there that's going on with, the residents and all those things that's all they're watching. So you're probably getting a lot of fear factor from the residents themselves. But tell us a little bit about what Pinnacle's attack is, not only just for the residents, but for the guests and so forth, and how you're dealing with your tenants.
Right. So, and again, this is kind of a common theme that you're going to hear from everyone on this call, and you've heard so far already. Communication is key. I mean, we looked at the documentation that NMHC sent out. We looked at the CDC. We looked at the World Health Organization. We have properties in Canada, so we're looking at public services up there. And across all of those mediums, we're getting kind of a consistent message from them as well. Wash your hands. Use, sanitary things like that have 60% alcohol base in them, making sure that you're doing enhanced cleaning, which means, touching services, elevator buttons, we're talking handrails, doorknobs, things like that. But what we have found that has been the most effective to help make sure that our residents and our guests and even our owners feel safe and secure in this situation is making sure that we are giving as much accurate information as we possibly can to our employees first. They're definitely hearing it from the residents, and they're saying, okay, well, why aren't you wearing a face mask? Well, because the CDC has come out saying that's not effective. They're giving that direct information from the CDC saying this is not what they recommend. We're going to the authorities, we're going to NMHC, we're going to the CDC, we're going to those places to say, this is not just coming from Laura Boyd at Pinnacle. This is not just my opinion of how things should be happening. This is what officials say. We're going to local governments, like right now, the situation in Washington, we're going to King County Health. We're making sure that we're getting out as much accurate information as we humanly possibly can to help calm the fears of those residents and those owners that, unfortunately, in this day and age, we've got a lot of information out there, but not all of it is right. And so we're trying to make sure that they get as much right information as they possibly can so that they can make educated decisions.
That's great. Sticking on multifamily, there's a specific part of multifamily within senior living. And Drew, I know that you guys have a big part of your business within Madison Marquette that handles senior living. It's it's scary, right? It's been being hit the hardest.
Mhm.
Is there a different protocol for senior living? Is there a different way you're talking? I know there's communication, but how is that effective?
Well, I would say yes, there's a different protocol, and it's probably exponential to everything else that we're talking about. Because senior housing, it's a much more vulnerable base of people. Generally, our older population. So the guidelines and having the correct information. So I totally agree with Laura on that. That you need to discern between what is a good idea to what is really a correct piece of information that comes from the scientists. So they're part of the process on the senior facilities we own, which are often managed third party. The guidelines we're giving is to ensure that people are screened and cleared daily, that the implementation of a wristband system to indicate that visitors have in fact been screened and cleared to come into the facility is critically important. We are also creating for all the real estate we control, a 24/7 monitoring system that really allows us to maybe set up early alerts or early warnings to various locations or cities or states that something else has occurred, like we've all heard about Seattle, similar to what we've probably all experienced or heard about, whether it's what churches or religious organizations are doing, what residential is doing. And I think to the extent we can share all that information and utilize best practices across the platform would be extremely helpful. This is uncharted territory for most of us, and we need to think, I think maybe in the worst case that it's going to get worse before it gets better. So let's double down on further protections and further notices and communications to every one of our clients and tenants, and including our partnership with our vendors on the cleaning side and on the IT side as well.
Thanks, Drew. The retail side. Let's talk about on the retail side. We have Angie Slanky. You are the National Director of Retail Services for Colliers. Tell us a little bit about, what can retail property owners, managers do to create a safe, secure, smoothly operated center once again, for their tenants and visitors. And Drew, you're going to be back up again. You're a busy man. Because you guys also have a lot of those assets at Madison Marquette. But Angie, if you want to kick off and talk a little bit about what you're seeing from your clients.
Definitely. So I think, I echo what most have said on this call. I think the first thing is that we really want to encourage the conversation about what's going on and stick to the facts, but also we have to come together united. And so a couple of things that I want to point out as it relates to, from a management and safety protection perspective is that, yes, we have shared with our building owners as well as our tenants, what we've seen as it relates to what the updates are from the CDC and the WHO. I think more importantly is what we're really doing is taking a stance and over-communicating as someone has shared by going out and not just handing out memos, but also providing Purell or any other sanitization type of product to the tenants and having that dialogue to provide additional comfort and other links for them to read on their own and investigate themselves. What we're learning, though, is when speaking with our various property management teams, especially here in Union Square in San Francisco, where we have other issues going on concurrently, is that a lot of our, a lot of our vendors and service providers are out with products. They may be out closer to July of this year, and so we're looking at other ways of getting a hold of these different products to share with our tenants. And that also that when we get into a situation where there is a need of escalation, which has already occurred for one of our buildings, that we're actually taking this one step ahead and escalating it with taking restoration companies and working with restoration companies that may have a higher level of product or cleaning products and services to combat this, the issues. So what we are finding, though, from a retail perspective, I'm a little surprised by. I've gone in as almost like a secret shopper to see what our retailers are doing, and it's either there's just information isn't being shared from a retail perspective, or the retailers are just keeping it pretty straightforward and simple, and that is just focused on having hand wipes out within their stores.
And Drew,
Mhm.
what about yourself as far as the owner? I know you've covered office, now you've covered senior housing, and now big part of the Madison Marquette portfolio is
Right.
retail. Yeah.
Right. So retail is different. It is point of sale. It is a retailer's livelihood. Nothing could be worse than this virus, which suggests that you don't want to be around groups of people. I think we're all seeing travel has been postponed. Major events are being canceled. But when you look at retail, where there's the aggregation of hundreds of people in a mall, in a just outside shopping, lifestyle centers, the risk becomes, I think, greater, yet the appropriate behavior has to be sensitive to the retailers as well. I don't think there's any person on the planet right now that is not cautious and not thinking twice about going outdoors. Again, for us, it's about just over communicating and asking people to be cautious. And so we communicate to our tenants. We're asking them to push that to their people. We are looking at a different communication plan within some of our centers and putting up signs. The goal is not to scare people. And I don't think individuals would be scared per se, but because everyone is pretty much aware of what is going on throughout the globe, and if people are sick, they should stay home. In the retail space, we want shoppers. We want people to walk around. One thing I'm thinking of is determining if there is a way to text shoppers as they're walking, much like the ads they get as they walk through different areas, just for us to over communicate. Obviously, constant cleaning, constant increasing the visibility of our cleaning staff to wipe down common areas, the surfaces, is increasing. It's something we've asked for in all of our office properties, and clearly the senior housing and living areas. So it's another area of a similar program until we know more, but it's a more vigorous program because we don't want to diminish the number of shoppers that enjoy going to bricks and mortar.
A funny thing happened to me yesterday as we talk about, people visiting crowded areas. I went to go out to have lunch, and I was sitting at a table with two people, and I got my Purell out and I put it on and I put it in my hand, and a table to the left and table to the right and a table to the right all asked if they could use my Purell. And it was just a sense of calmness when we all put it on our hands and sat there, a place here in Southern California. And it was just a very interesting, I just passed it around like, here, be my guest. But it was in that retail section, I think I just felt more safe. And it's interesting. So, talking about that communication and then having some of those things like Angie said about, wipes and Purell and all those other anti-infectants help. We always talk about industrial being the new retail, logistics, the supply chain, all that good stuff. Mark, you work a lot in the industrial. I mean, the global president for SIOR. I'm sure what a year to do that, because you usually should. The global president, I always know, is always on a plane overseas and so forth. Knowing the association, And then also, just as part as, with Century Commercial, tell me what's going on in industrial and what are, the tenants doing and staff and so forth like that for safety.
Yeah, so you're right. We've been grounded literally and figuratively. So yes, sir. And as we're doing this and I'm hearing all this, I've got my head resting on my fist. And of course, how many times do we touch our face? And I just did it for about a half hour. So anyway, with that said, yeah, so for industrial, it really, a lot of it depends. Are you a single tenant building or are you a multi-tenant building, right? So as a single tenant building, landlords, property owners, or just landlords themselves have a little less control on the property because sometimes these properties are self-managed. You can still be an informational source to your tenants. Some landlords might flex their muscles a little bit more and really take a little bit more control of the facility and make sure things are being done right. On the multi-tenant side, landlords obviously have much more control. They're doing all the things that everybody just got done saying. It's really not a difference on what type of real estate you've got when it comes to best practices and washing hands and sanitizing. Big thing that we're noticing is that most property owners were very much on the occupier side who own buildings, or even medium to smaller size landlords that don't have a plan. They're really creating their plan as we go. And one of the advice we give to everyone is make sure you have a plan before everything hits the fan like it's doing right now. And make sure that that plan is articulated in writing. And obviously that you're conversing with your tenants, as a lot of people have already said. Interesting in this building that I'm talking, I walked into the bathroom earlier today and they ran out of soap. And so it's amazing how many people are using soap. I don't think that's happened in the 5 years I've been here. And somebody had mentioned closing the non-essential common areas, gyms, locker rooms, cafes, things like that. We're starting to see that happen. The other thing that we haven't touched on, and it has to do with the health, but is your preparedness to check your lease, understand what the landlord can and can't do. And one of those things might be shut your building down. And that's not at your choice. It's at the landlord's choice. Do you have a plan that's in place if that should happen? A lot of people started to talk about mobility and having the ability to do business outside their office. We hope that's already in place. And can you manufacture elsewhere? So like retail, right, you're dealing with customers, they come into your shop. In our case, listen, sometimes you can't just pick up your manufacturing and move it, but you should probably have a plan in case you decide you're going to have to shut your facility down, or worse, your landlord tells you got to shut your facility down. So be prepared.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Kirsten, I was at the Hyatt in O'Hare last week, and it was a ghost town. It was very empty. Hospitality is getting, as we all know, is getting hammered, along with the airlines. Tell us a little bit about how you're educating the guests. I mean, when guests are nightly stayers, I mean, how are you handling that as far as an industry within the hospitality industry?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And yeah, this issue right now is very much affecting the hotel industry, and the health and safety of hotel employees and guests has been and continues to be a top priority for the hotel industry. And hotels have followed public health best practices, including daily cleaning of guest rooms and public spaces, and providing hand sanitizers to guests and employees. But now, really, the hotel industry is increasing these protocols and procedures to keep customers and guests safe. We're working really closely with the CDC. So like everyone else, the CDC released guidelines for businesses, employers, and event planners to help keep the risk of infection low. And we at AHLA have actually created a prevention and preparedness resource featuring relevant information from government, public health agencies, and industry experts to inform our hotels and also to share information with their guests. So, we're going to continue to work really closely with the CDC, the DHS, and the White House to share and gather information and share that with our hotels. Our members are are sending out their own messages explaining the procedures that they're taking at the property level, and we're just trying to do our best to be a one-stop shop on our website to provide all of our members, so the owners, the management companies, and the brands, with the resources that they need in order to make sure they're making informed decisions and that they're getting that message out to their guests.
One of the things that I read, that I got a letter from Southwest Airlines, and they talked about upgrading their air filters to HEPA to the style of hospitals, and they're doing that now so air travel could be more safe, so it can kill all the particles and clean up airlines. Is anybody in any of the facilities talking about whether office, industrial, I mean, obviously senior housing, in some of those aspects, but is anybody talking about that? Or anybody, because obviously it's an airborne aspect of it with sneezing and some of those other things. Is there anything like that that anybody can talk about on any of the different property sectors?
So I can tell you, certainly on the industrial side, we have not seen that.
Okay.
I have not heard about anybody changing their filtration system in a commercial building yet. That would be
yeah. We haven't. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say we haven't changed our filtration system necessarily, but we do have MERV 13 filters, which are one of the higher grades that we got during our LEED certification.
So we talked about keeping the facilities, and obviously it's communication, it's extra cleaning, stay home if you're sick. Commercial real estate and everything we do here, it's a very transactional business. It's built around transactions and making sure we're filling these spaces. Angie, Drew, Jeff, Mark, Laura, do you find, and everybody can jump in, one at a time, obviously, but has leasing slowed down? Is sales slowed down? Are corporate America pausing on some of these things, or have you found that some taking advantage of low interest rates, or is it you think as a whole affecting some of our transactional business? Angie, if you want to start off.
Yeah, this is Angie. Definitely the answer is yes. Just last week, we received several of our clients on the retailer side essentially just said that. We're hitting the pause button. So we had a couple of hospitality entertainment uses that were looking at several sites where we were just about to execute on LOIs, and they essentially said we need to hit the pause button, not only just due to the COVID-19 outbreak, but also the financial impact it's making. And so they are reevaluating, how do we retain what we believe is a Class A location for us, and just having that open conversation, principal to principal, with the landlord to see if they will basically hold on the site. So we're having those conversations. We're also seeing the other side from a supply chain, where certain retailers, whether they're in the specialized grocery space or in the apparel, where they're also saying, and cosmetics and beauty, we have to refocus and move from, the real estate and expansion and site selection process to evaluate the challenges we're facing from a supply chain. So a lot of these brands, their containers are still sitting in China, with the slow ramp up from, with reopenings of these factories. It's basically causing a domino effect. And so, everything just is on pause. And I wouldn't say they're in panic mode. They're just trying to figure it out as fast as they can.
Mark,
yeah,
talk about the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely piggyback that. And it's very similar. Listen, the supply chain first hit was in China, but there's also other places that there's some major hits, but China being kind of the main one that started a whole domino effect, as it was just said, for the challenges getting product, raw product or parts. We actually have at SILR a member portal where a lot of things are said, a lot of questions are asked, and to this point, has it affected our business directly? The answer is yes. I don't think the effect has been felt as significantly as we thought it might, and I'm just talking in general terms here. Obviously, a lot of it depends upon what industry you're in. We just here in the Northeast had a 100 to 150,000 square foot warehouse requirement come up about 6 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, for a furniture retailer who was prepping and trying to get a bunch of furniture out of China, and they were just going to have a temporary warehouse because they knew they would have a tough time getting it out in the future. We had actually I think it was a standing board, for surfboard manufacturer that using wood, that they could not get any of their wood supply out to make their product. Usually get the product out in the spring, and they're going to get it actually in September. So there's no question. There's a whole domino effect. We're seeing the challenges. We're not sure how big that effect is going to be, but I'm sure we'll start seeing that play out now in the coming weeks, now that coronavirus is sitting on our step.
Just to reiterate what everybody said, and to take it's about education and having groups like this get together and share your intellect and your experience, and everything you're going through is the key factor. It connects. We put on 25 events across the U.S. We have about 10,000 attendees. Last week we had 400 people in Chicago. We hand out hand sanitizers to everybody, and we said no handshakes and fist bumps, and it was it was an upbeat crowd, but it's changing week by week, and we're going to move one of our events that we're having in San Francisco to the fall. But at the same time, we're optimistic about this. This is, we're an industry that is all about survival. But like I said, it's all about information. I plan on wanting to do this in a few weeks again, like we talked about. We'll put it back out in the news. We'll send out emails and get this group back together again. Thank you so much for your time and the information. And thank you all for joining us on this special presentation. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Wash your hands.